What is a constitution? Why it is needed? So the very first question. So constitution, as we used to refer to the name, it is mentioned in the syllabus also. So constitution, what is it and why it is needed? So let us start with very simplistic version. So constitution is to constitute as the name includes the word constitution. So it constitutes something. So it constitutes a system. A system of what is called governance. A system of governance. So people need governance, right? So we need structure of governance. We need various roles to be played by those in the authority level, right? So utilities to be provided, and therefore there is a need for governance. So constitution constitutes the system of governance, right? Now basics of this could be traced to our understanding from the label of what is called society. Society including Indian society, any society including Indian society, it comprises of very diverse groups. Society comprises of diverse groups, and the diversity is based on several grounds. Say there are diversity based on religious allegiances. So following of different religion, and in this way we find social groups, right? Besides, Indian society has the peculiar feature that there are societal group based on caste. So various caste affiliations, right? All these grounds create different social groups, right? Then we find social divisions, social groups based on languages. So linguistic variation, besides race, ethnicity, also the gender differences, and so on. So society comprises of diversities, and there are diverse groups based on these grounds. We can observe at the micro level the taste, preference, interest, choices of people varies, right? One likes to eat fruits, other likes to eat the cooked food, others like to eat non-vegetarian food, one likes to drink tea or coffee, other likes to drink the soft drink. So there are variations. So individual variations leads to composing groups, and groups over a period of time develop various cultural characteristics, and thus we find a society having diverse groups based on various grounds. So where is a problem if society has various groups, right? Society having groups, is there any problem with that? So these groups, any social group which are diverse group, and because of this diversity there develops what is called there develops different aspirations, visions, goals, and these differences on account of aspirations, goals, etc. are to be brought to common living, right? So some common rules are required. Because of diversities, there are differences in terms of goals, aspirations, etc. And some common rules are required in order to coordinate the varied diversities. And these common rules are mentioned in the laws of the land. And the most basic law is Constitution. In order to settle the aspirations of diverse groups comprising in the society, there is need for common rules, and these common rules, needless to say, will be mentioned in various laws of the country. In particular, the basic law of the country, that is called the Constitution, right? So here comes a word, basic law. So why we call Constitution a basic law is because of the fact that Constitution is the chief source of law of the land. All other law emanates from out of Constitution. In subsequent discussion, it will become clear, right? So the basic law is Constitution, and that's how we have addressed our basic question that why we need a constitution and what is a constitution, right? So society needs governance, and how governance is to be provided, what shall be the ground rules of governance, who shall play the role of authorities, how authorities are to be elected or selected, right? How authorities are to be elected or appointed. So these basic or fundamental rules must be provided for So constitution is an answer of all these fundamental and basic principles. Hopefully it should be clear, right? Now the system of governance, we can note few facts. Last century, twentieth century had witnessed abolition of the absolute monarchical system of governance. So there was a movement from monarchical system of governance to democratic system of governance. So absolute monarchy means concentration of all authorities in the monarch, in the king or queen, in the emperor, right? And democracy, as it is defined as rule by the people, rule of the people, and rule for the people. Rule by people, of people, and for the people. So last century has witnessed evolution of the modern system of governance, and therefore democracy is the modern system of governance, right? So it has evolved over a period of time, and democracy has been adopted world over, including in India, right? So democratic setup we have, we will see the things. And as we noted, democracy means a rule by people. Since direct democracy is impractical because deliberation of state matters, deliberation or relating to state matters, discussion relating to state matters in the assembly of entire population, mass population, will not be a practical feasibility, and therefore a representative democracy is practiced. We shall note, system of governance has evolved from monarchical to democratic system. Since direct democracy is impractical phenomena, and therefore representative mechanism is practiced in the world, right? And under this system, representative democracy, there is formation of state, also called as a nation state or modern nation state, right? So state is created under the mechanism of representative democratic governance, which comprises of the three organs state has: the three organs, legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Now all this we have to discuss. We are in the process of discussion. So first we started with what is a constitution, why it is needed, and we answered in the societal context. So state is a political concept in the societal context. Society, since it needs governance, and therefore in the representative mechanism in the democratic governance, state apparatus is created, right? So the concept of state, that is to be elaborated upon now. State, as already noted, has the organs also called as wings. State is the apparatus which is utilized to provide governance. So state has three broad organs or wings called legislature, executive and judiciary, right? And the constitution of the country provides for each organ within the constitutional provisions, right? So we can think of very basic aspect. How shall the process of governance begin? So we can answer that it should be, there are population, society, 125 crore people, they need governance. So how the system of governance will begin? So we can answer, first, under the representative mechanism, elections will be conducted and representatives will be chosen. So it's quite logical to start with first have representatives, and therefore the legislative organ of the state comes into existence. So when we have elections and we have representative, which organ takes birth? It is the legislature. The play of governance is to start with elections. Upon elections, there are availability of representatives, and the representative will constitute the organ of state called legislature. So representative mechanism will give rise to the legislative organ through the election by people, right? And therefore the legislative organ is purely an elected body. How it come into being? Through election, and therefore the legislature or the legislative organ of state is purely the elected body, right? And the constitution of the country empowers the legislative body with a task called the lawmaking. So legislature under the constitution is empowered with the task, with the role of law making, and in this way the legislature is there, and through which the function of law making will be performed. So we have legislature. Now what comes next, and how the other organ will come into being? Because constitution will establish a mechanism whereby powers are differentiated. Powers are not concentrated at the level of one organ. Otherwise, it will become the monarchical system, where the king or the emperor will have concentration of authority, right? So, law making, and then comes law execution or law implementation, right? So, executive is the another organ. So, taking example of Indian system of governance, executive, that is the government, comes into being through out of legislature itself. So, under the mechanism, there is executive, and the executive wing of the state is given the task of law execution, also called law implementation, right? So, taking example of Indian system, Indian constitutional provision, we answer that executive, that is the government, to call it simply, the government and the government have two categories of executives. One is called the political executives, and they are the ministers. So, Indian context, how the ministers headed by Prime Minister, and the ministers in the states headed by Chief Minister, right? So, there is a rule of majority. The legislative organ, say in Indian context the parliament, going more particular Lok Sabha, and formation of government when it comes, those political group called political party, either singly or jointly, who can prove majority on the floor of the house, will be permitted to stake claim for formation of government. All these will be subject to discussion in the relevant chapter of parliament and then executive. So, here we are discussing broadly constitution and the system of governance. So, political executive will be in place under the rules provided for in the basic law. So, there will be rule of majority, say in Indian context, and there will be ministers. The other category of executive is called the permanent executive, and they are the officials. Permanent executive, and they are the officials. So, executive is a combination of both elected and selected body. The political executive, they occupy office and they comes through the mode of election, whereas permanent executive are appointed body, selected body. So, they comes through appointment under the system of recruitment provided under the constitution and the relevant laws regarding recruitment of what is called public services, right. So, various officials and employees are appointed under the system provided under the constitution and the laws. So that's how various civil services, say IAS, IPS, etc., various technical services, various other officials and employees of the government, and they comes into office and they join the government. So government of India and the state government, so they join the government, and in this way they form part of the executive. And the role of executive, as we have noted, is law execution or law implementation. And that's how we have the first organ and we have the second organ, legislature and executive respectively. Now there are laws and there are implementation of law. Then why do we need judicial organ? We have noted the third organ of state is called judiciary. So why there is a need for judicial organ? So we can understand this. Judiciary is purely an appointed body. Legislature is purely an elected body. Executive is elected as well as appointed body, selected body. Whereas judiciary is purely an appointed body. The judges in the courts from lower level to the apex level are appointed under the system provided for in the constitution. So we will see in detail in the chapter of judiciary, right? Now the question is, judiciary, the third organ of state, why we need judiciary? So the task provided for the judicial organ is called law adjudication, and this is the word, law adjudication. What does it mean? To adjudicate upon the laws of the land. So judiciary is not law making body. Law making is the role of the legislature, the representatives, the elected members elected by people. So law adjudication, we can understand the role as one common understanding is judiciary is to resolve the dispute. One common understanding regarding the role of judiciary is to resolve the disputes, right? And disputes can come up between, of course, people and people. So dispute between persons. So there are various matters on which there are disputes between citizens, between companies, between societies, right? So many entities, individuals have disputes between or among themselves. So it's a quite common understanding that who will resolve the dispute coming up? It will be the the judicial organ. Besides, dispute can come up between the governments, right? Say for example, Indian context. So we have central government and state governments. So there can be dispute on constitutional and legal matters between central government and state government, between two state governments, between union government and state government as one party and state government, some other state government as other party. So between governments there can be dispute. Besides, there can be dispute between people with government, right? Persons and government, there are disputes. So you need an independent authority to resolve the dispute, because if government is a party to dispute with citizens and the dispute is to be resolved by some official of the government, then the settlement of the dispute will be not favorable to people, to citizens, and therefore judiciary, which is regarded as an independent authority, independent from the control of the government. Independence from whom? Independent from the control of the government, the other wing of state, right? So such disputes are there which judiciary is to satisfy. So it is commonly understood. Besides, the task of law adjudication will include what is called the judicial review. Judicial review of the legislative as well as executive actions. Legislative action, that is law making, and number of laws are made and the existing laws are amended by the legislature. Number of laws needed to provide governance are made by legislature, as well as existing laws are amended by legislature. Besides the government executive action, these laws are implemented by the government. So what wrong can happen in this legislative action and executive action? These laws may not be suitable, may not be fair, just and reasonable, and therefore public interest may be at stake, and therefore the constitution may be violated, and therefore there is a need for an independent authority who is empowered to review the actions of the legislature and executive. The logic should be clear to us. Why we need judiciary as an organ? Because judiciary can review the legislative acts and executive acts, and thereby these acts which may harm public interest at large can be curtailed down, and therefore the violation of constitution, the violation of public interest can be protected, safeguarded, right. So we have noted the three organs, that is the state, society giving rise to state, and the first organ is legislature. Then it comes into being executive, and then under some mechanism there is creation of the judiciary. Now question arises, why this separation of power? This scheme is called, that is having three wings, is called doctrine of separation of power. Doctrine of separation of power, which implies horizontal division of power. It's not vertical. Parallels are created. Legislature, executive and judiciary are not superior or subordinate bodies. They are not vertically related to each other. They are horizontal. So relationship of equals. So horizontal division of power, under which these public institutions are created. Structure is created, and under the structure there are public institutions. Say legislature is a public institution, government is a public institution, and courts, judiciary is other public institutions. So three different organs and separation of power between the three organs, as already noted: law making, law execution and law adjudication, right. And when we create different institutions under the scheme of separation of power, needless to say that they will be assigned different roles, right. So different roles are assigned in order to create a system of checks and balance. Why three different organs? Why not to club all authority into one? Why not to give law making, law execution and law adjudication power to one body only? In order to exercise a system of checks and balance, right. And in this way the powers of these different organs are defined, their responsibilities are demarcated. Powers of different organs are defined, their responsibilities are demarcated, and their interrelationship with each other, right. How they are interrelated? So their interrelationships, right, as well as their relationship with people, citizens, entities, organizations, right. So different organs, their interrelationships and their relationship with people are regulated under the constitutional scheme. We should note, powers of the organs under the scheme of separation of power, which is established and operated under the constitution. Different organs are established, so structure is established. Different roles are given to the structure. How their different roles are coordinated, are interrelated in order to achieve the main goal, that is to provide effective governance. Right? To provide effective governance to people, for which legislature is created, government is established, and judiciary is established. Right? So what constitution will do? Constitutional provision will provide for a system of separation of power such that the system works with checks and balances. Right? So this powers which are given, the roles which are assigned to different institutions are parallel, because we have noted there are horizontal relationship between the different organs, right? Their roles are parallel, their roles is assigned in a manner under the constitution that they are complementary and they do not meet. That means fusion of power is avoided. Like the railway tracks, they don't meet, right? Yet the powers are coordinated to carry out the effective system of governance. Let me repeat. The functions are assigned in such a manner that the institutions are parallel, they are complementary to each other, they don't meet. So fusion of power is avoided, yet the powers are coordinated to carry out effective system of governance. Right? So the constitutional provision ensure that not single institution acquires monopoly of powers, because to avoid concentration of authority will be required, right? Otherwise it will become like kingdom. The king, the monarch has power to make rules, power to implement rules, and power to give justice in the event of violation of law. And this excessive concentration of authority in one hand, say king, can result into arbitrariness, right? Governance will be dependent upon the whims and fancies of the king, because the system of checks and balance will not operate under such scheme. Wherever there is concentration of authority, the system of checks and balance will not be possible to operate upon, right? So concentration of authority is to be avoided, and that's why there is separation of power, right? And therefore it ensures that one institution, constitution practices doctrine of separation of power to avoid concentration of authority, monopoly of authority, right? So that one institution cannot attempt to subvert the constitution. One institution cannot attempt to subvert the constitution, and thereby the constitution can check the transgression of power. It should be clear to us. We are discussing on the topic what is a constitution and why there is constitution, what role constitution play, right? What role a constitution play in the lives of people. So constitution constitute the system of governance. In modern democratic concept, democratic governance, there are three organs under which the organs are co-equals. Organs are not having superior or subordinate relationship, and in this way different roles are assigned to the organs. Right? So doctrine of separation of power to create a system of checks and balance so that the system of governance is adequate and it is there for the best interest of the people, welfare, right? Now this we have noted about the separation of power between three different organs. We have noted about separation of power between three different organs. In the constitution, we also find what is called apart from the tripartite separation of power, the threefold separation of power by creating three wings of state, legislature, executive and judiciary, we do find internal separation of power. What does it mean? So within the organs we find different institutions playing their respective roles through which the system of checks and balance is working. So say at legislature, at the level of legislature, there is existence of two houses. Bicameralism. That means two houses. So taking example of Indian Constitution, at the union level we have Parliament of India, in which we have two houses called Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Right? So there is a question, why do we need two houses? What purpose is served by having two different houses at the legislative level itself? Why we should have Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha? Right? So two houses. Just touching upon the issue, as we already noted, law making is the role of legislature. So when a law is to be made by Parliament of India, the law will be made by not one house but jointly by both the houses. How? The draft of the law will be passed through the required majority in both the houses, and that's how there will be a law. It will be passed by Lok Sabha as well as by Rajya Sabha, right? So chapter of Parliament, we will see the detail about lawmaking process. So what can happen? Taking an example, how one house can act against other house. Ideally speaking, if there are three different organs, one organ should be so united that it do not act against its counterpart, say Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. They should work in tandem. They should work in harmony. However, we see that a law which is passed in Lok Sabha may not be passed or may be passed reluctantly in Rajya Sabha, although it is a matter of required majority, right? So in this way, Rajya Sabha can check the act of Lok Sabha and vice versa. So bicameralism, two houses, say at the parliament level, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. One example of internal separation of power. Another example we can take at executive level. This is example at legislature level. Example of internal separation of power in order to strengthen the system of checks and balance at executive level. So you heard about Election Commission. So Election Commission of India, which is a body, and its role is to conduct free, fair and transparent election and thereby promote the democracy, because democracy start with elections, and we have already noted 125 crore people is reduced to elected few through representative mechanism through elections. So Election Commission of India is of course not legislature, as well as it is not judiciary. Then in which organ it fits? So we say it is executive. So if it is executive, the incumbent government, that is the ruling government, if Election Commission is executive, in that case the ruling government should never lose the subsequent elections, because elections could be held and conducted in accordance with the directions and instruction of the government. However, we see there are change of power, there are change of government in democracies. Change of government in democracies are frequently witnessed. So needless to say, Election Commission, despite being a body, part of executive level, executive organ, is provided independence to maintain impartiality in conducting the free, fair and transparent elections, so that people will prevails through the elections. So one example, Election Commission. Another authority in the executive level we can find, we call it CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So in Indian Constitution, Indian system of governance, we have an independent office named as Comptroller and Auditor General of India, whose task is to carry out audit of the books of accounts and records of the government, right? Books of account of the government. So what is books of account? Books of account are the record of the transactions entered into by government and various authorities of government, both financial and non-financial, right? So there can be instances of financial misappropriation. There can be instances of scams and scandals in government finance. There can be instances of misfeasance in public finance. If the audit, which is the dispassionate examination of books of account. What is audit? Audit is the dispassionate examination of books of account and records. So if CAG, which is neither legislature nor judiciary, which falls within the purview of executive, is permitted to audit the books of account according to the directions, orders and instructions of the ruling government, no wrong will be found in the books of account and records maintained by government and its organizations, authorities. And therefore, there can be misappropriation of public money, there can be various scams and scandals in the government finances, and thus public interest and national interest is harmed. So needless to say, there must be some system under which the auditing body, say CAG in Indian context, is outside the direct control of the government, because its role will be to audit the government's account, the accounts kept by government, right? So despite being part of executive, the CAG do not act in tandem with the government. Similarly, you can take examples, say Reserve Bank of India, which is the regulator of banking sector, is an autonomous body established under the law, right? So we find numerous examples of internal separation of power as well, in order to practice the system of governance such that it promotes the larger public interest, the general interest, the national interest, to promote the welfare. So welfaristic orientation on the part of the government. So these two are the examples at executive level. We can have various other instances of internal separation of power in mind. So this we discussed about constitution, about the why there is a need for constitution in a country, then how the system of separation of power, the doctrine, that is the principle of separation of power, operates. Now we have noted that direct democracy is practically not possible, is not feasible, because state matters cannot be discussed in the assembly of lakhs and crores. and therefore we reduce the number, that is people under the representative mechanism. However, there are instances of direct democracy in the world. So under the constitution of various countries of the world, there are instruments used to practice direct democracy. Say for example, we find instances like a referendum, plebiscite, instances of direct democracy. For example, referendum and plebiscite, where people has the right to vote on some state matter. So how we can explain referendum? Referendum is the right to vote of people to accept or reject a legislative proposal. Referendum is the right to vote of people to accept or reject a legislative proposal, right, on some policy matter. So we can take an example. In 2016, there was a referendum in United Kingdom regarding whether to continue as a member of European Union or to withdraw from the membership. So people of Britain voted, in which case the resultant was Brexit. So it was through referendum, right? Another, we have noted the word plebiscite. It is also right to vote of people on some sovereignty related issues, which is a state matter. Sovereignty related issue. What is sovereignty? Sovereignty means one which is having no external control. So state, say for example, Indian state is a sovereign authority, is a sovereign state. It knows no external power over it, right? So sovereignty issues, people vote and thereby decisions are made. So we can take some examples here. However, first we should note that Indian Constitution does not provide for any instrument of direct democracy. Constitution of India does not provide for any instrument of direct democracy. Under the Constitution, there are mechanisms to function through the representative democracy only, right? So we don't find that state matters and we the citizens are voting. So there are frequent state decisions, say whether to make changes in taxation, whether to implement goods and service tax, right, whether to have demonetization, right, whether to sacrifice territory in favor of Bangladesh or to annex territory from the other country. Why you are taking example of Bangladesh? Because we have Constitutional Amendment Act, right, 100 Constitutional Amendment Act 2016, in which there were exchange of territory between India and Bangladesh in the borders, right. We will discuss it sometime. So we as citizen does not have an opportunity to vote on this matter. There are legislatures, say parliament, there are governments, say government of India, and they work on behalf of people. However, we have seen the example of United Kingdom where whether to continue as member of EU or not was put to vote of the citizens. The British citizens were given the opportunity to vote on the matter. Right? So Indian constitution does not provide for such instruments. However, such instruments have been practiced in India, say for example during independence. So when the Indian subcontinent was to be partitioned in 1947, there have been instances where the territory was to be divided. Say in the Sylhet district, which is a Muslim majority district surrounded by Hindu majority areas in Assam, right? Similarly, in the northwest frontier province, which is the present day territory of Pakistan, right? There have been people voting on these matters, right? Similarly, when Goa got free, Goa, which was one of the Portuguese territory, when it was freed, there was a referendum in 1967 in which the territory, whether it is to be made part of the state of Maharashtra or it should be declared as a union territory, was voted upon. So Goa, which has strong Konkan majority, it has decided to form as union territory. So faced with the assimilation with the strong Maratha territory, Maratha community in Maharashtra, the people voted, majority voted through referendum in favor of Goa being a union territory. Later it became a full-fledged state in 1987, that is a different matter, we will see, right? So these are some examples. Similarly, you see Junagadh at the time of independence, which was a Hindu majority area, however it was ruled by a Nawab who wanted to accede to Pakistan. The ruler wanted to accede to Pakistan, however the people were Hindus. So they decided, first the state was annexed by Indian Union, and then there was a plebiscite in which it was decided, in which people voted to remain with Indian Union. So all these instances which we see at the time of independence, because that time we didn't have the Constitution of India, so there is no question of constitutional provision in applying referendum or plebiscite. And subsequently, when we talk about the Goa being made part of Maharashtra or being declared a full-fledged union territory, or say Pondicherry, where it was decided through referendum in 1954, right, to be freed from French control. So all these examples are not through any constitutional provision, because we have noted Constitution of India does not provide for any mechanism to practice direct democracy. However, these are there under the constitutions of various countries of the world, right? So some examples of direct democracy do exist under the constitutions of various countries. Similarly, we can take example of other instrument of direct democracy. Say there is an instrument called recall. A recall. Another instance of direct democracy, which means right of people to call back the representative. Representative through elections are chosen, and under this instrument of recall, the representative may be called back. That means before the end of the tenure of the representative can be called back, and it can be done through people's vote. So various constitutions do provide for this, in which a specified number of people from a territory from where the representative is chosen, right, can approach for exercise of right under the instrument of a recall, and if voted by the majority in favor of calling back the representative will not continue as representative, and maybe fresh elections will be held. Now, why representative can be called back? Under the defined procedure, say for example non-functioning or not functioning as per the expectations of people. So this we have discussed about the constitution. What is a constitution? Why there is a need for constitution? So why there is a need for constitution should be clear. There is a need for governance, and governance can be practiced under a system, and system will provide for constitution of state having 3 organs. Why 3 different organs are required? So that there is a system of checks and balance under the scheme of separation of power. Right? So society, different groups, because of various grounds of grouping, and there is a need for common rules which are available through laws, and these laws, the main law, the basic law being constitution. Now, having discussed this, let us discuss about the framing of Constitution of India. going ahead with the topic regarding framing of Constitution of India. So we have discussed what is a constitution and why there is a need for constitution. So let us go into some historical background of Constitution of India. So how Constitution of India came into being? And who crafted it? Question should be clear. How Indian Constitution, which we have at present with us and which is the topic of our study, came into being and who crafted it, right? So for that, let us go into the background. So there was popular movement, so national freedom struggle in the 20th century, right? National freedom struggle, Indian national movement, INM, you will read in modern history, INM, Indian national movement, and India got freedom with effect from 15th August 1947. Before that, Indian subcontinent was under British subjugation. So it was British government in India. It was British government in India. And Indian territory was freed by Britishers with effect from 15th August 1947. Right? Did we have constitution on that date? That means the day we got freedom, did we have the constitution? So no. We got constitution with effect from 26 January 1950. Right? It means August 1947 we didn't have Constitution of India. Constitution of India was in the making, and we had Constitution with effect from 26 January 1950. Right? Now, how Constitution came into being? Let us go into the question. So it was the month of November 46. November 1946. That is the time around which the British rule was on the verge of end. We got freedom in August 1947 and we are talking of November 1946. So nearly 9 or 10 months. British rule in India was on the verge of collapse. Right? In this month, the British Indian government has established what is called the Constituent Assembly. Right? For undivided India. November 1946, Indian subcontinent was one. So for undivided India, the British government established Constituent Assembly in accordance with what is called the Cabinet Mission Plan. Cabinet Mission Plan is a plan drawn by British government. Right? Cabinet, as the name suggests, cabinet is synonymous with government. So it was having cabinet minister of British government that time. So it has drawn a plan to free India. So under this plan, Constituent Assembly was established, in which the membership was from both the British Indian provinces, which are directly ruled by British Indian government, as well as the princely states of India, which were ruled by independent rulers. Were they really independent? No. They were under the British suzerainty. They were, the rulers of princely states were under the British suzerainty. Right? In this way we had Constituent Assembly, and to this assembly the task was given. The task was to formulate a constitution for free India. What is constitution? We have just discussed. So the task of Constituent Assembly was to formulate, to draw a constitution which is acceptable to all the community groups. Because needless to say, the constitution will set up the system of governance for entire population, and therefore the constitution must be acceptable to every group constituting the Indian society. So this Herculean task was given to the Constituent Assembly, and the membership of the assembly was from out of British Indian provinces, right? Say Calcutta, Bombay, Madras and some other provinces that you will read in history, as well as the princely states constituting the Indian territory. There were many princely states, small and big, right? Say Hyderabad, say Kashmir, say Junagadh, some name we have noted. So this was how we had a Constituent Assembly made up of all Indians. All the members of the assembly were Indians, and there were no Britishers, and the role of this assembly was to make a constitution for independent India, because independence was in offing. Independence was in offing. Independence is to come. This was declared by the Britishers, right? Now, some basic fact: Constituent Assembly, and it was under the presidency of Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who subsequently became first president of independent India, right? So president of Constituent Assembly was Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Some fact you should know. Now this assembly started its meeting, and the first meeting was held on 9th December 1946. However, there were communal tensions around the territory, around the Indian subcontinent, right? So it was found difficult to deliberate upon the issues of governance that are to be included in the constitution. Subsequent development was June 3rd, 1947. June 1947, that is nearly 5-6 months later, there was a plan called Mountbatten Plan. Mountbatten was the viceroy with the last Governor General, British Governor General. So Mountbatten, who was the viceroy and Governor General, he has declared a plan called the Mountbatten Plan. Right? Named with the Governor General and Viceroy, British. And this plan announced the partition of Indian subcontinent into India and Pakistan. Indian subcontinent was to be partitioned into India and Pakistan. And therefore, the Constituent Assembly was also divided. So those territories which were to fall into Pakistan territory, say for example East Bengal, Northwest Frontier Province, West Punjab, Sindh, Baluchistan, etc. So members belonging to this territory cease to become member, cease to continue as member of Constituent Assembly of India, and in this way the Constituent Assembly divided into two, 1/4 Constituent Assembly of India and Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. Right? Another development was the Indian Independence Act. Who passed it? Because it was not Indian Parliament that time. So it was passed in July 1947 by the United Kingdom's Parliament. So Britain Parliament has passed, right? And as the name suggests, Indian independence, as the name suggests, Indian independence. So this law act marked the independence of Indian subcontinent, right? And under which the continent was divided into two independent countries called Dominion of India and Dominion of Pakistan, right? With effect from should be clear. Under this law, the Indian subcontinent was to be freed with effect from 15th August 1947, and it is to be divided into two, Dominion of India and Dominion of Pakistan, right? This law has declared the Constituent Assembly as what is called the sovereign body. The Act declared the Constituent Assembly a sovereign legislative body. A sovereign legislative body. What is the role of a legislative body? Is to make law. Since there was no parliament because we didn't have constitution at all, and therefore no question of elections, and therefore no parliament, no legislature, no state legislature, So Britishers under this law has declared the Constituent Assembly of India as the sovereign legislative body, and it was given the power to make law for independent India. Besides its mandate to formulate, as well as this, besides its mandate to formulate a constitution acceptable to all community groups, that is the main role for which Constituent Assembly was established in November 1946, right. So hereafter it got this role as well. That is why we may find certain law which were made. For example, in India we have Factories Act 1948, we have Industrial Dispute Act 1947, we had Foreign Exchange Law earlier 1947. So who made these laws? These laws were made by the sovereign body, that is the Constituent Assembly, because it got this role, right. And therefore the assembly became the first parliament of free India. Its mandate to make law, its mandate to frame constitution, and therefore the assembly became the first parliament of free India. It should be clear. Besides some other facts. So this is all about how we have Constituent Assembly made by Britishers, partition plan, partition of Constituent Assembly itself, Independence Act passed by British Parliament, announced independence with effect from 15th August, announced that Constituent Assembly will act as sovereign legislative body. Besides some facts, Constituent Assembly has established what is called a drafting committee, whose chairperson was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Drafting Committee of Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly has established several committees to provide for the system of governance. So one such committee was called Drafting Committee, and the chairperson was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and we have noted that its role is to draft the constitution, to formulate the constitution, to draft the constitution, right. And therefore Dr. Ambedkar is regarded as father of Indian Constitution, right. The task of constitution making, if you see, November 1946 to November 1949, Why? Because 26th November 1949, an important date we should note. 26th November 1949 is the date when the constitution so drafted by the Constituent Assembly was adopted, right? Enacted, the Constituent Assembly adopted the Constitution of India, and if we read the preamble, we find the wordings, we the people of India adopt, enact and give to ourselves the Constitution of India. So it is through the Constituent Assembly the people of India adopted the Constitution. And this day is celebrated as what is called Constitution Day. November 1949, on which Constitution was adopted by Constituent Assembly, is celebrated as Constitution Day, right? And therefore the Constitution, which is framed during this period, that is, we have noted, first meeting of the Assembly 9th December 1946, although Assembly was established in November 1946. And in between partition of the subcontinent, which has unleashed, which the partition unleashed the communal violence across the territories of Indian subcontinent. So we can visualize that constitution making was in the background of the horrendous violence that was unleashed after the partition was announced, right? So constitution making by assembly, through this process in between we have noted. Now another important date is 26 January 1950, and this is the date from which the constitution came into force, and therefore this date is regarded as date of commencement of constitution. This date is regarded as date of commencement of constitution, because with effect from this date constitution came into force, constitution came into operation, and this was declared on this date. So 2 month time was taken in order to start the constitution, and since that date we have constitution in practice that has established the system of governance and which is in force, and it is a basic law. No law can be derogatory to Constitution of India. So Constitution is the basic law, right? Now another small thing, why 26 January only is chosen? When this constitution was adopted, why 26 January is chosen, was chosen? It has a historical significance because it was on this day in 1930. So 26 January 1930 was celebrated as Purna Swaraj Day. 26 January 1930 was celebrated as Purna Swaraj Day upon the resolution of Indian National Congress in its Lahore session in December 1929. So there is an annual event called annual session of Indian National Congress, which was the main body, main organization in Indian national movement. So that body used to have annual sessions. So in December 1929 it had Lahore session, where it was decided to celebrate 26 January the next year as Purna Swaraj Day. Considering that historical event in mind, the constitution makers has chosen 26 January as the day to start the constitution of independent India. Should be clear? So since this date, which is celebrated as Republic Day, January is celebrated as Republic Day. Since that date, all the laws like Indian Independence Act, Government of India Act 1935, under which Indian territory by Britishers was being governed, were repealed. So when Constitution came into force, Government of India Act 1935 was repealed. All this you will do in the modern history. What is Government of India Act? What were the provisions? What were the before earlier laws? All this will be in modern history. So Constituent Assembly, Constitution making and Constitution coming into force. Beside Constituent Assembly has done some other tasks also. So one of the tasks which was done by Constituent Assembly was the national flag. So the design of national flag was adopted by Constituent Assembly. You are required to remember this date. July 22, 1947. July 22, 1947, which is before 15th August 1947. So Constituent Assembly in its meeting had adopted the design of the national flag called tricolor or Tiranga in Hindi, made of three colors: saffron, white and green, with Ashok Chakra, a 24-spoke wheel in navy blue at center. So this design was approved by Constituent Assembly on this date. Such dates can be important from preliminary examination viewpoint. Which become the national flag of Dominion of India after 15th August, and which was adopted as national flag of Republic of India with effect from 26 January. Besides Constituent Assembly, so once this task was done by Constituent Assembly, the national anthem was adopted by Constituent Assembly on January 24, 1950. 24 January 1950, which is just 2 days before the Constitution came into force. So Jana Gana Mana, which was composed by the nationalist leader Rabindranath Tagore, and it was originally composed in Bengali, was adopted as national anthem of India in Hindi version, and this was adopted by Constituent Assembly, right? Besides, another task done by Constituent Assembly, we have national song Vande Mataram, which was written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. It is a Bengali poem which was composed later by Rabindranath Tagore, right? So it was written by, the Bengali poem was written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, and this was adopted as national song on the same date, January 24. So we should remember, Constituent Assembly has done these three works: national flag, the design of national flag was adopted, national anthem and national song, right? Besides, election of Dr. Rajendra Prasad as first president of Republic of India since which date? First president of Republic of India. So India became republic with effect from 26 January. So he was elected as first president of Republic with effect from 26 January 1950. So his election was also conducted by the Constituent Assembly, by the members of the Constituent Assembly. So you may note, under the present system, as per Constitution, the Indian President is elected in a particular manner, where there is voting by both houses of Parliament, where there is voting by members of Legislative Assembly, but first President was elected by members of Constituent Assembly. This was another task done by, right? Now, on this day, 26 January 1950, we were not having legislative organ of state. So Constituent Assembly started functioning as what is called the Provisional Parliament of India. With effect from 26 January 1950, the Constituent Assembly started functioning as Provisional Parliament of India till first general election. Conducted in 1951-52. They started somewhere around October 1951 and the results were published in and around March 1952. So till the time 1950, 26 January onwards, till the first elections were conducted for Parliament of India, Constituent Assembly functioned as the Provisional Parliament of India, right? Because first election, we have noted, was held not in 1950 but in 1951, that also towards the end of 1951, which continued for long, and the results were published in 1952, the first quarter, around the month of March 1952, right? So this is how we had constitution, this is how we had the national flag, national anthem, national song, this is how we had provisional parliament. We have already noted free parliament, first parliament of free India was also Constituent Assembly. So both the roles are by Constituent Assembly. Now lastly, before we end, Constitution is written as a text. Indian Constitution is written as a text, right? And the text is written as what is called preamble, as articles and schedules. The text of Indian Constitution comprise of the preamble, the articles and the schedules. Originally we had 395 articles and 8 schedules. Originally, that means as on the day when Constitution came into being, we had 395 articles and 8 schedules, and through amendments from time to time, that is through modification of Constitution, amendment of Constitution, because Constitution is a living document. Constitution represents the societal needs. So needs of society changes and therefore the system of governance changes. So amendment of Constitution is inevitable. So through various amendment, many articles have been repealed. Through amendments, there were amendment to preamble. Through amendments, schedules were added, and at present we have 12 schedules. At present, we have 12 schedules in our Constitution, right? Then these articles are bunched into what is called parts. What is a part? If you see the bare act of Constitution of India, you find that articles are clubbed together into parts. So parts are the interrelated articles that deals with specific aspect of governance. So say part 1 deals with India and the territory, that is the union and territory. Part 2 deals with citizenship. Part 3 deals with fundamental rights. Part 4 deals with directive principles, and so on. Then articles which is a specific provision regarding some aspect of governance is subdivided into clauses. So we call it clause with respect to articles. They are also regarded as sub-article, right? So that's how Constitution, which is a law and which is a basic law, is drafted, and it was adopted and it was enforced. The dates are to be remembered as student. Besides, we have noted that Constitution came into force with effect from 26 January 1950. However, some of the provisions of the Constitution, for example, provisions relating to citizenship, came into force with effect from this date itself. So some provisions of Constitution, say citizenship, came into force from the same date, right? So that's how we discussed about framing of Constitution of India, right? So national flag, national anthem, national song, besides there are state emblem